Al,
Hey, how you doing?
good. How are you?
Oh, learning. One
Good. That's a good
of
start.
those days you got to ignite for 2 hours in the morning, a little bit of a break, and then your class.
Oh, well, that's good. How have you liked Ignite?
So far so good. Everybody's been great, and like told you last week, I'm as fresh as they come. So, what was it? It was like buyer offers or something. We went over yesterday, and she walked us through the whole thing. From actually went into transaction desk and had us. We could even go along with her from our own computers, which is what I did. And she created an offer and went through the whole process, and that was so good.
Nice.
Really enjoyed that. So
Good.
I'm looking forward to getting started.
Perfect.
My signs should be in this week. I got my business cards all ordered and designed, ready to go today. Learned about Facebook marketing all through Command and how to run ads on Facebook, and got the website set up where I have my own domain, Alberto Realty, that forwards to the KW page. And yeah, time to start marketing. I think by the end of this week, start really pushing that and hopefully be comfortable enough. And Lindsay has come out and, she's the coach, and she said, hey, if you need any help, you get somebody that wants to work with you, just let me know.
Nice.
So I'm excited
Good.
and nervous.
You know, a name I always forget from the Detroit Lions is the Hall of Fame running back, who's thought of as the greatest running back of all time, but I always forget his name.
Barry
Who?
Sanders.
Oh, Barry Sanders. Yeah. I always forget that name. I don't know why I always forget that name, but I always forget that name.
I can't, kind of hard to see from here, but let's see here if I move this over. Oh, you can kind of see that case
Oh, yeah.
with the helmet. It's autographed by Barry.
Wow. Ah, nice.
Oh yeah. I've got his rookie card. I got. I'm a pretty big Barry guy. I mean, even when I move this around. Oh. Oops! I don't know what happened to you. There you go. So.
Wait, go back up to the Lions all-time. Oh yeah, right. It said Lions all-time something, and had like plaques, little plaques of people. Oh, there's the helmet.
And even more Barry stuff. Oh yeah, I'm a big Barry fan, and then I'm rooting for Stafford. I'm a big Stafford guy, autographed.
Oh yeah.
So, oh yeah.
He's got a good cast around him, so. Well, the Lions also have one of the great receivers of all time.
Yeah, there's a reason my son's name is Calvin.
Is that right? Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I heard all this talk about him. I'd never seen him, and I tuned in on the game one time. And I watched him. I was just like, did I just see what I just saw? Oh my gosh, I couldn't even believe it. He's not only fast, but he was so long, and he had such great hands, and holy cow.
So he's the first ballot Hall of Famer. Yeah, it was when my wife got pregnant, talking about names, and she's like, well, give me some boy names. So, me being a sports guy, I just started naming off Detroit Lions.
Barry.
And then she came to me the next day and says, like, I really like Calvin. And I'm like, let's do it. Calvin it is. So I tease that my 8-year-old son's named after a 6'5" black guy.
Nothing wrong with that. That's awesome.
So yeah, I love Calvin. I've got a bunch of his stuff here as well.
Well, we're about almost time to start. We got 4 of us here. I suspect we're going to get a couple more join us in the next minute or two. But if you don't have out, everybody, if you don't have out, you might want to get out your Form 35, the Inspections Contingency Addendum, and Form 35R, and Form 35W, and Form 35C. The 35s. I'm watching the doorway to see if anybody else comes in. We'll give them 60 seconds.
So I saw the 35, you said the C, W, R, and then just the 35?
Right.
Before.
Yep. I'm excited that so there's somebody right there. So yeah, predicted correctly. I'm excited that on the 7th, which is a Monday, I'm at 2 o'clock. I'm going to be starting a series, and I'm going to do 3 classes. I'm going to do three consecutive classes on those Mondays that are on transactions that are just not normal. So one is the first one on the 7th is going to be vacant land, and the one following that on the 14th is going to be on contingent transactions, and the one on the Monday following that, 21st, is going to be on new construction. Yeah, and one on new construction. The new construction is actually the one on the 14th, and the 21st is the other one. So, and those are going to be recorded so that they're going to go into our library, wherever that is. Goldie keeps those. You can get a hold of Goldie to find them. So you'll be able to pull those up anytime to go over. You don't have to be there for the Zoom meeting that I do. You can actually watch it later on the video. So just wanted to let you know that's coming up. I'm excited about that. So any questions about last week's material I covered on the financing addendum? I know that was a complicated sort of deep subject, so I just wanted to see if there's any questions about it. Okay. All right, well, then we will start in on the inspections contingency. And so like the other contingency forms, when you make a transaction conditioned or contingent upon something to your client's favor happening, like with financing, or like with this inspections addendum, there's procedures to follow that are all contractual procedures, as opposed to legal or statutory procedures. These are contractual procedures that are all spelled out. And then there's going to be the buyer's right to approve or disapprove of the contingency, right? And it's got to be done in a timely manner. So the way we as real estate agents can really mess up our job, is to not be responding in a timely manner. So In the financing addendum, if they've got 21 days to get financing on day 19 and 20, you better be looking really hard at that all day, those days, to make sure you're getting everything in order, you got everything done properly. And likewise, with our inspections contingency, most of these inspections contingencies by default on them are going to be 10 days. And I'll show you where you can write in different. That needs to be written in differently, but they're 10 days. So because they're 10 days, you've got to keep your eye on that. They are going to include weekends and holidays in counting those 10 days. So realistically, you might only have, 5 or 6 days, working days, I should say, to get it done. And so when I say get it done, when the inspection, when the transaction is conditioned upon the buyer's inspection, you're going to have to let your buyer interview inspectors. You got to have time for that. You're going to have make sure there's time for them to then make the appointment with the inspector, and you're the one's probably going to have to open the door of the house with your lockbox key for the inspector and meet him there. And if you do that, you have to be there the entire inspection. You can't just pop it open and take off and come back 2 hours later. You're going to have to be there. So you're going to want to bring stuff to do while you're there, and make calls or whatever you got to do. But you got to be there for security purposes when you use your lockbox key to open the door for the inspector. So they've got to select the inspector. You've got to make the appointment for the inspection. You've got to be there and open it up for them. You're going to have to not have conversation with that inspector while they're doing their job. There's too many legal perils that can get in there, can wedge their way in there if you're having conversations with the inspector. So you want to just pretty much keep it to niceties, pleasantries, and security. That's it. Once the inspection is done, you're going to have to get a copy of the inspector's got to have time to prepare the report, and then you're going to have time to go over that report with your buyer so they can decide how they want to proceed of either approving or disapproving. And so my point there is that it takes some time to get those things done, right? And if you're familiar with the process and you know exactly who it's going to be, the inspector, you can get it done fairly quickly as long as they're available, the inspector's available. But when you've got 10 working days and you're counting at 10 working days, and you're really going to be only 6 working days, maybe 7, but probably 6, you're going to be tight, on getting everything done that's got to get done. So my point there is it's not a lot of time. You're going to have to be moving quickly. Here I am. I'm a hypocrite because Brianna and Raquana, you've got your videos off, and it's really hard to teach to the names. So I love it when you have your video on. If you have to have it off, I understand that. I said I'm a hypocrite because I was in a coaching meeting yesterday where everyone had their cameras on, and I was the only one that didn't have mine on most of the time. Because I admit I was multitasking. I had a bunch of stuff that was going on, but at any rate, so I understand when there's things that you got to get done. But if you can have it on, I appreciate it. Thank you. So with the inspections contingency form 35, at the top of it, you're going to fill in the information about the transaction that ties it into the main purchase and sale agreement, the Form 21, just like you did with the Form 22A, the financing contingency. And then you're going to have the date of that main purchase and sale contract, the buyers and sellers' names, and then the address of the property. So the beginning of this, paragraph 1 says that, where it says as a heading inspection contingency, it says This agreement is conditioned on buyer's subjective satisfaction with inspections of the property and the improvements on the property. So that has an important meaning, and it should have an important meaning to you. You're going to have to sometimes defend and explain your buyer's actions on this. And so so sometimes you get pushback from the listing agent on things, and you've got to be, prepared. And that's why I want to give you that knowledge to how to communicate with them. So you could, if you had to terminate or otherwise, and the other agent is giving pushback somehow, saying, well, your seller didn't even make an appointment. Well, your seller, or your buyer, I should say, your buyer. You go to this very first sentence I read, and you said, you know what, this agreement is conditioned on buyer's subjective satisfaction. Subjective satisfaction means they don't need to explain anything to you or your seller. It just means they can terminate. It's their decision to make. This was legally how our lawyers set this all up. Our MLS lawyers set this all up so that the buyer wasn't going to have to give any explanations to the seller. So yes, my buyer did not go later and do a formal inspection with an inspector like you are saying. They don't have to. They can inspect it themselves. And what could their inspection be? It could be they drove by the house and looked at the siding, or they drove by the house and looked at the roof. Or as they were leaving, when they first saw the house, they noticed something that they just forgot about, and then they remembered it, and it concerned them. They don't have to give explanation. So they're terminating you, or they're, whatever the thing is. So, but again, my point here is that we want to be able to be familiar with this wording and how to use it, because it's not uncommon to get pushback from a listing agent or seller on that. And so then it goes on to say that the buyer's inspections, plural, notice that word inspection is plural with an S at the end, right? Buyer's inspections, so are they limited to just one inspection? No. May include at buyer's option without limitation, the structural, mechanical, and general condition of the improvements to the property, compliance with building and zoning codes, and inspection of the property for hazardous materials, a pest inspection, a soil stability inspection. Buyer's general home inspection must be performed by buyer or a person licensed to do inspections. Okay. So in other words, the buyer can't have their cousin Pete or their Uncle Bill come out with them. No, there's liability reasons for that. So the buyer can go out and look at it themselves and perform their own inspection, or they can hire someone who's licensed to do inspections, one or the other. Okay, most buyers, when they do their inspections, hire someone. I think it's around $400 for an inspection. And so that's going to save them a lot of money in the long run to know what it is that they're buying. I would think it's important to know what you're buying. So they can have multiple inspections if they want. So let's say we have a 10-day inspection, and that line for the number of days, by the way, is line 22 on your Form 35. There's a default in parentheses of 10 days, unless you fill in the blank with, a different number of days. And so 10 days gives, your buyer time to maybe have a structural inspector come in, maybe have a roofer come in and look at the roof for them, maybe have a pest inspector look at it for those purposes. I mean, so the buyer, I'm saying, is not limited to the number of inspections they can have during those 10 days. They could have an inspection every day if they want to. And sometimes the listing agent and our seller will try to push back and say, no, they had their inspection. They had their inspection on the 3rd day after we went mutual. Okay, and they're going to have one on the 4th, and on the 5th, and on the 6th, on the 7th, and on the 8th, and on the 9th, and on the 10th, because it's their contractual right to do so if they want to do that. And you've got to know where this wording is to have those conversations, right? So that is inspections plural that may include all those different things. One A says sewer inspection. These are lines 12, 13, 14. And so if you don't check anything, it defaults to may, as it says in the parentheses. So you don't really have to check anything. Your buyer may have also a sewer scope. So it's become very, very common these days, especially in the city of Tacoma, for there to be issues with the side sewers. And the city of Tacoma even has a side sewer advisory that they put out on their website to warn buyers, that, there's no guarantee they're going to have a great working sewer service, and they should have a sewer scope done to be sure. Sewer scope is gonna, I'm not sure the exact amount, but it's right about $200, I think, for a sewer scope. Some of the inspectors that do their inspections have that included in their cost, and they are have the equipment and ability to do those sewer scopes. So those are some things to check out when you're checking out inspectors to recommend to your buyers. The sewer scope is that they're going to check to see if there's any issues with the casing that's being broken, or because a lot of times in our area there's a lot of tree roots that go down, penetrate down, and they bust up those casings and compromise the sewage system. And so we want to these can add up easily to $15,000, $20,000 or more dollars for the fixing up of these sewers. And so we don't want to have our buyer get in a position like that. We want to have them do that sewer scope in advance, so that they can know if they're going to have issues or not. Okay, as I go through these things, I want you to ask questions. If you don't feel shy at all about doing so, if you have questions.
I have a quick question for you.
Sure.
I recently had an inspection done, and I'm the listing agent. The seller was asking if she can be present during the inspection. Is there anything like in the agreement that states if the seller can or cannot be there?
No, it's their house, so they can be there for it. It could be looked at culturally, I guess, as offensive and invasive of the buyer's, right to have things inspected. But it's their house, so if the seller wants to be there, they can be there. If you're the listing agent, I would recommend that you be there, because it's just going to likely create bad feelings or mistrust and different things, and so it's probably better not to be.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't see anything in the Form 35, so I just thought I'd ask.
Yeah, no, it's their house, and so because they're conceding to let someone come in and do an inspection under your, if you're the buyer's agent, under your care, you've got that responsibility to make sure that you're going to see to it that nothing happens, right? And so when I say nothing happens, just a couple of years ago, between 2 and 3 years ago, we had a situation where one of our agents had an inspection. One of our agents was that listing agent, and an agent from another office had an inspection done, and when the inspection was being done, the listing agent happened to be there also, as well as the buyer's agent, and besides the inspector, someone else came to the door and they said, "Oh, we're the carpet guys, whatever. We just while the inspection was being done, we just wanted to quickly measure a couple of rooms for carpet." Is that okay? Sounds innocent, right? It wasn't okay, let me tell you. This buyer had issues just 2 years before where they had somebody break into their house and they had things stolen. And so they had cameras installed everywhere in the house. And they had photos of these carpet measurers going into their bathroom, which is innocent enough, but then they made the claim that they had a really expensive medicine that went missing. So it was just an ugly drawn out situation, which cost the selling side office a lot of money from their commission to make this thing right. And so I would warn you that you are the guardian of the house when the inspector's there. Nobody else is allowed in. Only the inspector and the buyers. The buyer and the inspector can go in. Nobody else can go in. Of course, the seller can because it's their house. But if anybody else comes and says, "Well, we're going to measure this," or "We're here to check out that," no. Unless they're licensed as an inspector, they can't be going in. That was a hard lesson for me to learn. I didn't know that after 30 years. I didn't realize that wording is in here, and it protects that seller. And our job is to make sure we're protecting their property while the inspection is being done. Where it says buyer's obligations, number 2, paragraph 2. Lines 15 through 20, it does say that all inspections are to be ordered by the buyer, performed by inspectors of the buyer's choice, completed at buyer's expense. It says buyer shall not alter the property or any improvements on the property without first obtaining seller's permission. This comes up sometimes too. Buyer is solely responsible for interviewing and selecting all inspectors. Buyer shall restore the property and all improvements on the property to the same condition they were in prior to the inspection. Buyer shall be responsible for all damages resulting from any inspection of the property performed on the buyer's behalf. So it doesn't say that the inspector is liable or responsible. As a matter of fact, the inspector is going to make your buyer sign something saying they're not going to be responsible. So the buyer is the one that's going to be responsible for what the inspector does, any damage that they do to the property. So if the seller comes home from work that day after an inspection and they find a couple of the ceiling tiles are all broken up that weren't broken up before, and it's going to cost $100 to go replace them or whatever. Okay, so that falls on the buyer. Buyer's going to have to pay for that. And then if the buyer is all upset and says, "Well, it's the inspector," then the buyer is going to have to go after the inspector for those $100, but they're responsible to pay the seller for the damage. Okay, and this happens too often. It happens. Then paragraph 3 that says buyer's notice is when it's telling you about where you fill in that blank on line 22. Or leave it blank, which defaults automatically to 10 days, right? So that's a 10-day inspection period, which I think is about the right amount of time when you consider the computation of time. It gives them about 6 working days to get it done. In today's market, we're seeing a lot of inspections being waived. Okay, so 2 years ago, we were seeing most inspections being waived. A year ago, we were seeing most inspections being waived with offers. Another word for that is called stupid. So when the buyer's waiving their inspections, that's not smart. They should want to know what it is they're buying and the condition of the house when they are buying it. And so the only way they're going to know that is to do the inspection. And if they waive the inspections, that's kind of dumb to do. I just wouldn't ever recommend it. your dialogues that you have with your client are really important at that stage. So when you're writing the offer, and you say to them, you know, most offers contain a Form 35, inspections contingency. You know, if you're trying to make your offer look really good for the seller so they want to take yours, you know, you could waive that. You can also stick a sharp needle in your eye. You can do all kinds of stuff, you know, but I don't recommend it. You know, I don't recommend it. I think that what you should do is have an inspection done. Maybe we could put some wording in, add some wording that says that we're going to be not be asking for repairs by the seller. The inspection will be a pass-fail inspection. Okay, so at the most, that's probably what I would do. But you know, I don't know what the seller would be afraid of. I guess the seller's real fear is that they're going to tie up a house now for 10 days, right? They've had 3-4 buyers looking at it. Now they tied up with a certain buyer. They're going to drag it out for 10 days, and then they're going to ask for a whole bunch of piddly stuff they didn't plan on expense-wise, right? In their move. So I get that. So one way to solve that is just to say that the inspection will be pass-fail only. Okay.
What's the downfall of having a pre-inspection done?
I don't think there's a downfall to it. I've heard Annie Fitzsimmons, the legal hotline lawyer, mention that she doesn't like those at all. But I think personally just think they're really good, because what that means is that if you use the Form 35P, which is the pre-inspection form, and the seller would have to generate it because the seller is going to have it signed, then it goes to your buyer and your buyer signs it, and that gives them the permission now before making their offer to go into the home. Check it out. I think that's a good idea. I think they charge less, the inspector does, because they do a more of an abbreviated type of inspection to make it quicker. So they charge a little less, and then the buyer still gets the gist of it. If there's going to be anything major they're going to have to worry about. And then they can make their offer, and then the seller doesn't have to deal with this unknown about, you know, what's going to happen, you know, in 10 days, what's going to happen? Am I going to have to renegotiate everything, you know? No, they've got the answer. It's right in the offer. 35P's already been done. So, and I'll go over that response section for you on the 35W, where you do the response on there at the time of submitting the offer.
So with how short houses stay on the market these days, it sounds like with the pre-inspection, it really just depends on the inspector and how fast they can get it done.
Yes, so it'd be good to have them connect with the inspector right away.
Okay.
So they got a plan for that. They can say to an inspector, they can say, you know what, we want to do a pre-inspection. You know, how much would you charge just to zip over and look at it really quick and give us a good indication of if there's anything we need to worry about, rather than awaiting the inspection like so many are doing these days, right? So then the inspector can have that discussion about time and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. So I also wanted to let you know that on our Keller Williams Facebook site, there is a tab. There's a tab for documents, contracts, documents, something like that. And if you click that, one of the first things that will come up is wording that you can put in Form 34. It's Form 34 verbiage that you can use. And I think one of those that I wrote, and these are ones I wrote, so you can use those, is for that pass-fail type situation. So so you can check into those later and see how you would like to use that, how you might like to use that. Of course, it's always, the important part here is it's not our decision. It's the buyer's decision to make. If we were to say something like, you know, oh, you know what, you're going to be in competition for this, so you want to waive your inspection. Don't do that. that's going to put you at risk as an agent for maybe directing them into some murky waters. So I want to make sure that that's done properly.
I had a question about that because we
Yes.
talked about that this morning. So basically you're just saying, because she was saying that a lot of people are waiving their inspections, but that they could do a pre-inspection. So if they decide to do that, they would still just waive the 35 form and just use the 35P form instead?
No, what they would do is the seller would have to sign it first, and it's Form 35P.
Okay.
And that is the permission form for the buyer to do an inspection before going into contract with the seller. So that if the seller generates it, signs it, and then the buyer signs it, then they have permission to go ahead and perform an inspection before they submit the offer. Most sellers and listing agents seem to be really good about that. They like that. In fact, a lot of listing agents have the 35P already signed by their seller and put into their listing documents, which is cool because then you just have to have your buyer sign it and send it back to them, and you're good to go. Go do your inspection before writing the offer. So if you work out the schematics of that, that could be pretty nice. And then what you're going to do, we're going to see this in a little bit, is on the 35W. When you do write the offer, you would use the 35W, and there's a section, there's only 4 little sections in there, and one of those sections is for work orders you want to have done, not work orders, but repairs that you want to have done before closing. So that could be addressed right up front in the offer. But at the very least, it's going to give your buyer that peace of mind knowing they had a professional inspector look at it. It was nothing major, a couple of piddly little things that they don't even care. They'll take care of later when they actually close, so they're good to go. Gives them that peace of mind. I think that's a pretty cool way to do it. My caveat there is that Annie Fitzsimmons, who is I think a brilliant legal mind, has her reasons why she thinks that's not a good idea. That I've heard her share before in different things I've gone to where she's been a presenter and things like that. I've heard her explanation. I didn't buy it. I didn't think it was a good explanation, but so that's why I say you might want to go see if you can find something of Annie Fitzsimmons where she addresses that pre-inspection. But as your designated broker, have at it. I'm comfortable with it. More than comfortable with it. I like it. I like utilizing it. I think it's a good strategy. Much better than just waiving it. So if we go now to the Form 35R, what I'm going to do with this Form 35R is I'm going to take you through the process that is listed in paragraph 6. A portion of it is addressed here in paragraph 30, and then it continues on to paragraph 6. And so in this Form 35R, which is the response form to 35, you, representing the buyer, are going to have the discussion with your buyer as to how they want to address this inspection report that they now get. And the first thing I want to warn you about is to not send a copy or portions of the inspection report to the listing agent. Because by doing so, you automatically waive the buyer's inspections contingency. And so that's in paragraph 4 of this form. So So paragraph 4 is your instructions to not send any portion of the report to the buyer without the seller's written consent. The reason for that is because as human beings are, what we had been doing in the past, and I say we, I never did it, but I know that there's agents that I saw do it, is that they would try manipulating the situation when they did their inspection and then requested repairs, and the seller would say, no, I'm not going to do the repairs. Then that buyer's agent would say, okay, the seller's not going to do the repairs. Great, now they have actual knowledge of the defects because I sent them over the report. Now they have actual knowledge of the defects, and they're going to either have to fix them for my buyers or they're going to have to fix them for any future buyers because they have actual knowledge. And I'm going to follow this listing and see who writes it up, see who goes under contract with, and I'm going to contact them and let them know, make sure that that's taken care of. That's really being hard-nosed about it, right? And that's what people had done in the past. And so to avoid that conflict, I'll call it, they put in this paragraph just, not too many years ago, a couple of years ago, they put that in there to say that without the seller's written permission, the buyer can't send them any of it. The only exception to that is if if the buyer is going to request an additional inspection, which is one of their choices that we're going to see right now on Form 35R. So it's the third choice. Yeah. And if the buyer is going to request that additional inspection, they have to include the inspector's recommendation for that additional inspection. Okay, so that's all you can send them, is literally you cut and paste the words that say, as the inspector, I recommend an additional inspection of the roof, for example. And those are the only words you can send them. You can't send them those words plus some photos of the roof. No, you can't do that. All you can send them is those words that say that they recommend additional inspection. And if you do that, then you can check that third box that says buyer gives notice of an additional inspection. Which the additional inspection is right at the very bottom of the first page. Talks about how that process goes. So they would have 5 additional days to do the additional inspection. I heard someone say something.
Quick question. So, you represent the buyer, you do the inspection, you're saying don't send the inspection to seller. What about in those, well, obviously not in today's market, but when you try to negotiate, money back for repairs and stuff like that, that you found in the inspection report, how would you go about doing that if you're not sending them what the problems are?
Don't make it contractual. So you can't, unless they agree, unless the seller agrees to get it. So you can check it right on the form here. You can check the box that says that the seller is giving permission to send a copy of the report. Or you can use that Form 35C that I told you about. And Form 35C is basically the same 2 things you see on there that the seller would sign, giving the buyer permission to send the report. So you can do that, or you would want to just have a verbal conversation, maybe a text conversation with the other agent, just saying something like, yeah, the buyer, there's some major issues the buyer found under the house. And so to cover the expense of those anticipated repairs, the buyer would like your seller to pay $5,000 of the buyer's closing costs for them, as an example. But that's gray area. So that's really gray area, because the other agent could hit the roof and say, oh, you sent us some info. Okay, but from what I've seen so far, since this went into effect is I've seen it so that, and when I say seen, I'm talking about Annie Fitzsimmons, the legal hotline lawyer, also giving opinions on this and reading her opinions about it. And she is also of the opinion that as long as you are not sending a copy of the report or making reference to the report, can't do that either. But you're just saying the buyer has found that there are some major issues going on under the house that they anticipate will cost them $5,000. So they would like to just have your seller pay $5,000 of their closing costs, and then we'll just call it good.
Yeah, I've
So
seen
what
them.
if the sellers or the listing agent asks, well, what did you find underneath the house?
Then
Then
I
we're
would say-
allowed to, then we're allowed to say,
then yeah, you would. Then I would say, well, if you send me Form 35C, I'll send you the report.
Okay.
Al?
Yeah. As I said, I've seen it both ways in the couple houses I've bought, not from a real estate agent side, so I don't know what goes on behind the scenes. You know, in one instance, they sent us a form with a breakdown of things that they wanted us to fix as the sellers of the house, which were all, you know, nothing big, but, you know, just little things here and there for us to fix, which wasn't a problem. And then when we were buying, for example, our current house, you know, we negotiated, I think, an extra like $2,500 for them to put towards our closing costs for repairs. So I've seen it both ways.
Right. So is that your new house?
This is our newest house, yes.
I like the color of the wall and the nice white trim and stuff. Looks good.
Yeah, this is my lion's room.
Yeah. It's a nice color. They call in a sexist way, they call that a man cave, right?
Yep, I've got the sign over my window. It says man cave.
Okay. So then on that 35R that we were looking at, then so that first section at the top is where your buyer is going to check one of those four choices. Okay, and this has got to be done before the 10th day, right? So you got to make sure you're watching those days. You got to respond. So the first choice is the buyer is just basically saying the buyer's happy with everything, they're going to move forward and close. So you would check the first box if that's the case, right? The second choice is for the buyer just to terminate, just to flat out terminate the deal. No explanations, no asking for anything, nothing, just saying we're killing the deal, we're gone. Okay, that's the second box, so that's very final. So you want to make sure your buyer, that's what your buyer really wants before you go checking that form. The third one, as I said, is if they want that additional inspection, in which case they would get that extra 5 days to have a specialist or whatever come and look, but you've got to include the words from the inspection report saying they recommend that additional inspection. And then the fourth and final choice there is the buyer is requesting the following modifications and or repairs. If seller agrees to these modifications or repairs, the inspection's contingency shall be deemed satisfied. So then in that blank space from lines 12 through 18, you're going to have some room to write in whatever it is that your buyer is going to request that the seller repair. So let's say that the buyer from the inspection report had 20 things that were brought up that were kind of negative and probably ought to be addressed, right? So if those 20 things are all written in there, can the seller terminate the transaction? Can the seller terminate the transaction unilaterally right there?
I don't think so, but they can go back and decline to do it.
Correct. So they can't. So the answer to that is you're right. They cannot terminate, but they could go down to their seller section, which is the next section, and check the box that says we're rejecting everything. So third one, we're not going to do anything. Sorry. Okay, then it goes back to the buyer, and the buyer has the choice to either move forward having nothing done, or they can terminate. Okay, but my point on this that I want to make is that if you list all 20 things on there, most sellers are probably going to check that third box in their reply section and say, I'm not going to do anything then. Even though probably 15 of those 20 things are going to be piddly little items that are going to cost a total of, maybe $500 total to take care of all 15 of those things. But we're dealing with human beings. So most human beings, when they see a list of 15 things, they throw their glasses in the air. They go, I'm out. I'm not going to do anything. Okay, and then they check that third box into the seller's response and say, I'm not going to do anything. So we've got to be careful how we would approach that. So I would tell my buyer this. I would say, sometimes sellers, if they see all 20 things, like you want me to put down there, sellers freak out. Okay, and they say, I've lived here for 10 years. It's been a perfect house. I've maintained it perfectly. There's no problems. And if they have an issue with them, they can fix them themselves. They're not going to give me a list of 20 items to do. But if we focus on just the main issues here, which I would categorize anything that comes out of the inspection report into 3 categories. They're either safety issues, or they're major component issues, for the functioning of the house properly, or they are, John's term, piddly issues. That's my dad's term, actually. For piddly issues, there are things that, when I say piddly issues, they're things that anybody could go do themselves over the next year. They're not going to harm anything. They're not going to hurt anything. But right now, it's just causing the seller major stress to think about having to do 20 things. So let's focus on those safety issues and the major things, which are, probably going to cost about $15,000 versus the $500 the other 15 things are going to cost. So let's focus on those, because we also have a name for those things called deferred maintenance, right? Deferred maintenance means they are things that probably the seller should have been taken care of and didn't. And now it's, time to pay the piper, as they say. It's time to take care of them. And so that's a conversation I would have with the other agent, the listing agent transaction, so that he can carry those words to his seller that we're really good buyers to work with, because we've got 20 things we could be addressing, and we're only dealing with 5. See, it looks really good, doesn't it? And so let's focus. And they're setting, and 3 of them are safety issues, which you would want to have done anyway for you and your own family. You want to have those done, right, seller? So we might as well get them done, for us, and then later they'll have the house, and there won't be safety issues for them, and we won't have to worry about a lawsuit coming later or anything like that. So let's take care of those safety issues, right? Those major components of the house. Let's take care of those. So we've narrowed that down to 5 issues. So we're going to put those 5 issues in that space here. And then, and of course, this is the decision of the buyer. So the buyer says, nope, I want to have all 20 done. All right. I'll send it off that way. And I just want you to be prepared for this third box to be checked and sent back by the seller. That's usually what they will do. But maybe not. Maybe they'll take care of it all. We'll see, right? So I think that's pretty important to understand how to present this to our buyers, and then later how to present that to the listing agent. So the listing agent will have words to use when they go back to their seller. Okay, so now, after we've made the request for repairs, we go back down Form 35R to Section 2, which is the seller's response to the buyer's request for repairs or modifications. So, so now the seller has to check one of 4 boxes. If they check the first box, it's saying that the seller agrees to do everything the buyer requested. And we're ready to move forward. The second box is the seller trying to negotiate something. So the seller says, you know what, I'll do a couple of those. I'll do, for example, I'll do 3 of those 5 things, but not all 5. So then they would write out, the seller would write, or listing agent would write out what those things are that they would do. Okay, so then the buyer has to make a decision, and the buyer can terminate still, right? The third section is the seller rejecting all proposals by the buyer. Okay, that usually I don't see that happen unless the buyer's asking for a lot of unreasonable things. And the fourth of those 4 boxes is, it says seller rejects all proposals by the buyer, but proposes the following alternative modification or repair. So, so an example of that I see happen quite often is that box is checked, and then and then here, I guess to get it off of 35R, sometimes it's best to have it on the 35R, is just to write on one line here to have a kind of standalone as best you can, to have it say seller agrees to pay $8,000 of the buyer's closing costs at closing. Assuming it's going to be an $8,000 repair. And then give it a little space, and then in a separate sentence say buyer hereby waives this inspection's contingency. Is satisfied. Buyer is satisfied with and waives this inspection's contingency. Okay, so then we've accomplished the 2 things. And we've kept them apart, because believe it or not, if this goes to the underwriter reads it and it's all put together in one sentence, they go, oh, in lieu of doing repairs on a house that's going to be the collateral for my loan, the buyer's going to get $8,000? Yeah, I don't think so. That's not how I work as a lender, right? I protect the collateral in the house. So I want to see those repairs done. And I got to see proof of it. So that's what it could create. But if you leave a separation between the 2 sentences, usually the underwriter doesn't seem to tie them together and worry about it. They read one and they go, oh, okay, so they're going to pay some of the closing costs, fine. Then they see a space and they see another one and says, oh, okay, so they're waiving their inspection. Okay, good, okay, they're good. It just seems to fly right under the radar. But the problem is that if you don't disclose that, because you're going to have, like, I had this question, might have been yesterday morning. I had the agent call me about this. Oh, it was yesterday, yeah, Tuesday morning. And the agent that called me about it was saying that the other agent in the transaction, who was a licensed real estate, the owner was a licensed real estate agent selling his own property, said, oh, you know what? The lender's saying that we've got to have this be not be out here where the lender can see it, because if the lender sees it, they're gonna require it all be done up front, and they won't do the closing cost thing and all that kind of stuff. So they won't allow it. So I told her, just what I just told you. I says, well, then write 2 sentences and put some space in between the sentences. Write 1 sentence that says that the seller is going to pay $8,000 of the buyer's closing costs, and then have the other sentence spaced, say, buyer is satisfied with and hereby waives the inspection's contingency. That's it. And she said, well, but the lender was saying, and I said, you know what, it wasn't the lender saying it. It wasn't the lender saying it. It was the mortgage broker who was saying it, because it's not their money and it's not their collateral. So what do they care? They're oftentimes the worst offenders of this felony. Yes, it's a felony to deceive a federally related lender. So you can't, so that mortgage broker would be complicit in that deception, and so they would be also liable possibly for that $10,000 fine and or 10 years imprisonment. So my job as your designated broker is to not let that happen to any of you, right? So we don't want to get nailed with a felony on that. So we want to be open, have it in writing, have it disclosed, have it written in a way so it's not like it's being hidden. And I found this to be the best way to do it, to have it written, but not in a way so it ties them together and makes it all look ugly and stuff. And so you separate the 2 sentences out so they can see clearly. I'm saying the lender, so the lender can clearly see seller's going to pay some of the buyer's closing costs, no big deal. Okay, and then the buyer waives their financing contingencies. Great. But otherwise, it could be trouble. And I mentioned the lender because it's not really the lender. It's not the one loaning the money. It's the mortgage broker. So they're leading you down a dangerous path, right? By trying to get you to write it in a way that could get you positioned for an orange jumpsuit. I say jokingly, but it really could. So not likely, but it could, right? So you want to be careful about that. Okay, so that's that 4th choice the seller would put in there. Sometimes what I see done is it says they write in that space or on that 4th space for the buyer's response at the beginning. Either one of those is all right. C attached addendum A. And they'll have a blank addendum, form 34, and they'll put an A at the top or whatever. And then they will write in, have more room to write in those things that are going to be requested or done. If needed. Okay, so this is pretty. This requires some good negotiating skills, right, on your part. And so when you were going into real estate, remember that you always said, I'm a people person. That's what everyone says, right? I'm a people person. Well, now this is where we find out if you're a people person, because a people person knows how to negotiate and talk to people about stuff. And so how you propose those repairs to the listing agent, is a skill. You got to practice. You got to get yourself good at it so you can make it seem like it's a benefit to them. I can understand your seller might be upset about, the expenses for doing this. But on the other hand, they might otherwise have to put it back on the market. So then we're dealing with another 30 days or whatever, and probably the same result. And sometimes it's best to just, deal with what you got at the moment and not just push it down the road where you have to deal later. And we got a buyer who's ready to go right now. Your seller has basically deferred some maintenance. Now it's time to pay the piper, right? It's time to take care of that stuff and get that done, and then we're ready to close and be done. So the manner in which you present it, you notice when I talk, I know I kind of put people to sleep, but you notice my voice is soft and calm, right? I rarely yell. I rarely get overly excited about anything. Maybe the Seahawks a little bit, but rarely about anything. And so my suggestion is that that's just something we have to always be working on. I have to, even though it's my nature, I still have to work on it all the time. Because sometimes I get upset about things, and I have to calm myself down, get ready for the conversation, make sure that I'm presenting it in a way that the other side, will not take it as a personal attack, but work with me. So being a people person and negotiations is just a really important piece to our business. Okay, so this is pretty critical stuff. So then the buyer is going to have the final say, as I said, at the very bottom of this thing. And so the buyer can either accept the seller's response on the first box, or on the second box, just reject it and terminate the transaction. Boom, done and gone. Or the third one is the buyer rejects the seller's response but offers an alternative. So can the buyer offer a new negotiation on this thing? Yes, but they've got to be super, super careful. Because here on Form 35, going back to Form 35, on page 2, right after that section 6 that talks about this back and forth response, is a section that says in big bold letters, attention buyer. That's line 62. It says, attention buyer, these time periods for negotiating repairs or modifications shall not repeat. The parties must either reach a written agreement, or buyer must terminate this agreement by the buyer's reply deadline set forth in that last little buyer response section we just read. Buyer's inaction during buyer's reply period shall result in waiver of the inspection, in which case seller shall not be obligated to do anything. So we want to be really careful about the time frame here, keeping an eye on that time frame. And so we do the responses here back and forth between the seller and the buyer are 3 days, as specified here in section 6. So the buyer gives their response, then the seller has 3 days to respond back. Okay, so a fairly common thing to have happen is 3 days goes by and the seller doesn't respond. And the buyer's agent, our buyer's agent, is all panicked. And they call me on that day 3 and they say, oh, I haven't heard from him for 3 days, and now we're on day 3, and at 9 o'clock tonight, it's done, it's over. And I say, no, it's not done, it's not over. Don't panic. Today was the seller's deadline to respond. If they don't make it, that doesn't terminate the transaction. All that means is that starting at 9 o'clock p.m. tonight, at 9:01, actually, technically at 9:01 tonight, if you've not heard from them, you have to assume that their response is no, we're not going to do anything. Which means you now have 3 days to respond to their non-response. So day 1 would be at 9:01 p.m. Day 1 would be the very next day. And you got day 2, then day 3, and then you got till 9 o'clock p.m. on day 3 to give your response to terminate, if you want to terminate. Okay, so this is stuff that happens all the time, and it's not that the seller or listing agent were being jerks. Well, sometimes they're, but usually not. Usually they just got tied up. Usually the seller was out of town, listing agent was just busy with another transaction or something, and so they just didn't get back to you. So it's no panic. Just count 3 days from when it was due, and then your buyer's going to have to then make a decision if they want to terminate or move forward without anything being done. What I found is oftentimes all of a sudden the seller and the listing agent reappear on the next day after it was due. And they say, "Oh, we're so sorry this happened to happen, but we'll take care of this. Let's go ahead and get this all signed, and then we can get it all done." But it's not, it's not necessarily panic mode, is what I'm saying. Questions about that 35R?
So what if we have the inspection and we're not asking for anything? Is there still a response needed? If the buyer is
Yes.
100% satisfied with the inspection?
Yeah, first box.
Okay.
And the reason I say first box is because it would really have the same effect if they just didn't do anything, right? So they could either just not do anything or else check the first box. The problem is if they don't do anything, then they have a way to come back on you later and say, "Oh, we wanted to, but you know what? Mike told us not, Mike didn't tell us we needed to respond." And so we want to protect ourselves. So by having that box checked and have them sign it, now we've got proof.
And also, just to clarify, if we do ask for a new roof, and they say, "Okay, we're going to give you a new roof," and they send it back in, see here, the seller's response, the first box is signed, then that's the complete contract or completed form, right?
Right.
Buyers don't need to reply to there.
No.
Okay.
No, seller agreed to do it, then we've got mutual agreement. Okay, so let's look back on Form 35 again, please, and notice that on page 2, following the stuff about the repairs in paragraph 6, paragraph 7 has the word repairs and says, if seller agrees to make the repairs proposed by the buyer, then repairs shall be accomplished at seller's expense in a commercially reasonable manner. Again, that wording right there, commercially reasonable manner, means something. It comes directly out of the UCC, the Uniform Commercial Code for the state of Washington, which gives more details about what that means. And basically it means a licensed and bonded contractor. So we do want to make sure for this, the listing agent, that the seller is using a licensed and bonded contractor. Well, even for the buyer's agent, we want to make sure of that, right? So we want to see, see proof that it's been done by a professional in the right way, because sellers oftentimes will try to get away with what they can get away with, right? So they'll get the duct tape out and get the butter knife out of the kitchen drawer, and they'll see if they can just do it themselves, right? And instead of having a professional do it, and this wording says that a professional is supposed to be doing it. If the buyer wants to make sure it's done and done right, the responsibility is the buyer's to pay the inspector again to go back out, and just recheck the work that was done on that one thing they called out. There's no other option. I mean, the buyer could just terminate, but they really need to have the proof that it wasn't done right. And so that means getting that inspector back out, having them check that item, whatever it was, and then have some sort of written explanation to give to the seller. Say, you know what, we were going to close Friday, we can't close now because our inspector went back out and said that he didn't do it right. And here's our explanation. Okay, so then, so that's the repair section. Section 8 is just for the inspector to make notice of whether or not there is the existence of an underground buried oil storage tank. Okay, so there's still, I think, some properties that have those. Most of them have been abandoned but not decommissioned, so that's a problem. So sometimes these old underground tanks that aren't even used anymore have been sitting there with a little bit of oil in the bottom of them. Sometimes that oil is seeped out into the soils and things and causes a problem. So if there is an underground tank, the inspector would want to check to see if there is, and if they say there is, then that might be the additional inspection, is that you have the local fire department, that's who usually does that, go out and look at it and see if it's needs to be decommissioned or what needs to be done with it. And then you could write that into your Form 35R. That for sure is deferred maintenance. It's something that the seller should have done, taken care of. Number 9 is a reminder that that there is a septic, that there might be a septic system on the property instead of a sewer. So if there is a septic system on the property, then you would want to make sure you use the Form 22S, Form 22S dash whatever county it's in, and that would address the septic system contingency as a separate issue. And number 10 is a paragraph I don't recommend using ever. A legal, Northwest legal mind that I admired for many years, Doug Tingvall, explained that he loves to, they call it pontification, right? So he loves to pontificate forever and ever and ever. And he did that to me one time for about 45 minutes about why. He says, John, don't ever let your agents check box 10. And he told me about why it makes the contract unenforceable. So I'm just warning you that this neighborhood review contingency of 3 days, if you're doing the inspection contingency of 10 days, why do you need to have the 3 days that's taken in by the 10? It's not going to be an additional 3 days. It's 3 days that's part of the 10. Why would you even have to use that, right? Because with the 10 days, you can terminate for any reason. So I don't see that there's a need to ever use that paragraph 10. And since really one of the very brilliant legal minds of the Northwest in real estate has said it potentially makes a contract unenforceable to use it, I just don't recommend using it. Questions about anything on Form 35 or 35R? Okay, let's look at 35, 35W then. So sometimes the buyer wants this house. They know there's multiple offers coming in on it. They want to get it, so they want to waive their financing contingency, right? So that doesn't ever mean that you can just not use Form 35. In every transaction, you must use either Form 35 or use this Form 35W, one or the other, in every residential transaction where there's a house.